For TigerDetails.com, Jerit Roser here with Russell Johnson from BulldogBlitz, our Mississippi State site on the Rivals Network. And Russell and I are just talking about we're trying to get ready for this season that is now finally happening. Saturday, the Bulldogs and Tigers kick off at 2:30 in Tiger Stadium. And a lot of turnover, notable turnover for both programs, some key pieces for Mississippi State and most of the team for LSU. And so a lot of fans, media, and everyone else eager to see this first glimpse at these two teams. Russell, man, how's everything been going out y'all's way? Appreciate you taking some time on a Tuesday night to chat a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Things have been going about as well as they can. Everybody's kind of just trying to stay safe, stay in somewhat of a bubble, and kind of stay out of trouble. Right now, especially the players on the football teams, I'm sure they're essentially in a bubble, not able to go anywhere, really do much other than, team-related activities, trying to stay out of contact tracing, not get COVID right before the game.
Yeah, it's been such an interesting off season, and even as recently as last week, Coach O at LSU referenced most of the Tigers have by now had and overcome COVID-19, and that got a lot of mixed reactions nationally and became a storyline as some national columnists kind of snapped at that and took issue with that. What has been kind of the mindset of Coach Leach and that group out in Starkville as they kind of navigate through some of this, get ready for the season? There was a point where I think a lot of us didn't know if a season was going to happen at all, and now it's here, but there's still been a lot of protocols and a lot of controversy of COVID-19 to kind of wade through, distractions to wade through as, a new staff, a new quarterback, and everybody in Starkville kind of gear up for this season through all of that.
Yeah, I think, you kind of hit it pretty hard. There's protocols, and Leach really has talked as little about actual players being out due to contact tracing, due to positive tests or anything like that, about as much as possible. And so have the players, the coordinators. It's almost like a coordinated effort, which, it probably is. But it's been so hush-hush that it's been kind of hard to actually keep track of how many players have had the virus, especially, in comparison to, like you said, with Orgeron and how many he talked about, and how he said that almost the whole team is, kind of went through it and had it. And kind of it seems almost like that is another strategy that some schools have had. I know Clemson had the same thing, where early on in the process, I wouldn't say the process, early on, when everything started really ramping up, was when, Clemson really got hit hard by it. And what they do is they shut down practices, they shut down workouts, and then but that never happened in Mississippi State. I would say the closest thing they had to any type of cancellation or anything due to COVID was with the social justice issues, when they skipped practice and were out protesting and doing things like that. They were doing that with masks on, and almost the entire team and coaching staff were able to be there. And that was really the one time where they were scheduled to practice but did not end up practicing.
With so much going on and as little as we've had a chance to see of these teams because of practices being closed and things like that, what is your overall take, football wise, where the Bulldogs are? We mentioned there's new coaches in place, there's a new quarterback, and it's a new year. So ultimately every year is a new team. Where do you get the sense that these guys are in terms of football and being ready for the season, and what Saturday is going to look like from, a new tenure now?
Yeah, you call it a new tenure. It's going to be an entirely new brand of football that I don't think Mississippi State fans are really fully prepared for. The coaches have talked about the air raid and what it's going to be like, throwing the ball, getting 2 or 3 guys with 40 to 50 catches on a regular basis consistently year to year. And just the difference between that and what they've seen in the past with Moorhead last year and the year before, and then with Dan Mullen. It's a completely different offense, a completely different identity, because you've got that on one side, and then you've got the 3-3-5 defense on the other side. And finding a way to get pressure on the quarterback, especially this weekend against an inexperienced and away quarterback in Miles Brennan, you've got to find a way to get pressure on him in that formation. And the 3-3-5 isn't exactly known for generating pressure with just the front three. So the preparations, I mean, it's been really hard to kind of get a feel for anybody who's talking about people being in the best shape of their lives and, the different cliches that coaches give and talk about. It was really nice earlier this week when we got a depth chart so we could actually know the pecking order, or at least somewhat of a pecking order. I know depth charts aren't Bibles by any means, especially from football coaches. But like I said, it's nice to actually see that. And I'm sure fans are just excited to see some football on Saturday.
Yeah, I think as much as LSU had been asked about and discussed some of the depth chart, that when the Tigers' first official depth chart came out on Monday, there weren't a ton of surprises for folks in Baton Rouge. Ali Gay, the JUCO defensive end, getting the nod over the senior Trevez Moore was probably as notable as anything, but both those guys were expected to play before that depth chart came out, and both those guys are still expected to split a lot of reps now. Any big surprises from the Bulldogs depth chart that did come out? I know I think the expectation out here was that Costello would be the starting quarterback, but that was still somewhat unofficial, and even when Coach Leach talked about it Monday, he mentioned it in a very, I would think that KJ gets the first snaps, but that, multiple guys are playing well there. What was your kind of reaction to seeing, while it may not be a Bible, seeing that first chart come out?
Yeah, like I said, it was nice to see, especially the first team offensive line, seeing exactly where they're going to line up, because, I mean, with the offensive line, that's going to be different as well, because they're using completely different splits. They're using completely different types of blocking. I mean, it's a completely different system. But, another thing that you're talking about Costello is the fact that true freshman quarterback Will Rogers has worked his way up. He beat Garrett Schrader. Garrett Schrader ended up changing positions to receiver, and then to beat out, I believe, a senior quarterback in Jalen Maiden too. And just seeing how fast he's climbed up the ladder at quarterback. I think by the end of the year, Mississippi State fans will see Rogers, but I don't think that happens on Saturday.
So you think we're looking at KJ Costello start to finish, or for the meaningful snaps on Saturday at quarterback?
Yeah, definitely. Pending injury, and I mean, anything could happen. There's always a possibility they could have, a little bit of a package for Rogers, being that he's a little bit more agile and quick with his feet than Costello is. But Costello just fits the offense, and I think that was the excitement that came from Leach, from the offensive staff, from everybody around the Bulldogs program when they were able to land Costello, was the fact that he knew the offense. He's played against the offense, he's watched the offense, and he's got a chance to now run the offense. Now, what about LSU's depth chart? Did anything really kind of surprise you other than, you said the defensive end situation?
No, I mean, by now it kind of was that defensive end spot. There'd been a lot of shuffles this offseason in terms of who was still on the roster on that defensive line, with a couple of opt-outs and two guys that were initially expected to be the likeliest starting defensive ends in the spring ended up transferring, had some different things going on. And so once some of that dust settled and it was clear who was going to be on the roster by this week, I think a lot of it fell into what was expected. I mean, they're going to use at least three running backs and kind of a little bit of a rotation there. Miles Brennan has waited several years now for his chance. He's waited out Danny Etling and Joe Burrow, and now gets a chance as a fourth-year junior to start. And they'd brought in a couple of graduate transfers that had been pretty quickly identified, as well as they had won those jobs, and Jabril Cox at linebacker, the North Dakota State All-American, and then Liam Shanahan from Harvard taking over the center spot. But as much as this team lost from that national championship team, other than that defensive line and maybe one of the linebacker spots in a 4-3 base, a lot of it had kind of cleared itself up pretty early on in the offseason. And now it's just, looking forward to seeing how they actually look together in unison on Saturday, and particularly against a team that I know they've struggled to scout somewhat, or at least they've found some challenges in scouting for a team that they had to worry about Mississippi State's personnel, but then different coaching philosophies coming from multiple different schools around the country, particularly out west.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's got to be really hard to prepare for because the caliber of athletes in Starkville, Mississippi, compared to Pullman, Washington, are night and day difference. You've got high 3 and 4 stars, and even a couple 5 stars on the roster for the Bulldogs, and Washington State. I mean, he was averaging I think about a 45 to 55 ranked recruiting class every year. So it's completely different, from a talent standpoint and from a coaching standpoint, because this is their first year in this offense. They didn't have the reps that could become so valuable in the spring. They've had them in the fall, but they've been splitting. And I think that's something that I think is going to play a real factor in the quarterback position on Saturday, is the fact that Costello's been splitting reps in practice for so long that he didn't get near as many reps as he would have in a normal, spring and then a fall camp.
For what we do know right now, what are maybe some areas that you feel confidently, or that Mississippi State has said that, or given any indication that they may feel confident they can have some success Saturday against LSU, versus some areas of concern, whether it be stuff that you have in mind or stuff that they've kind of led on to that may be an issue in terms of dealing with this LSU team? I know the Tigers really want to get after Costello and apply some pressure, and that's kind of been a mindset for this year as a whole with the switch to the 4-3. And at the same time, they're going to certainly want to protect Miles Brennan in his first start out there. So I guess pass rush each way has been something that's been referenced a lot in Baton Rouge. And when Mississippi State's had success against LSU, that's been a big part of what they've done well, is playing well up front, particularly on defense. What's kind of been the read on things from that side of this matchup?
Yeah, so I don't think that this is going to be one of those years where they excel in rushing the passer, especially with the front three. That's going to be a place where they may struggle a little bit. They don't have the depth or the talent that they have in the past. They've got quite a few underclassmen and former blue chip recruits on that D line, but I don't know if they're necessarily ready for the spotlight that's going to be coming on. But in terms of things that I think that they may be able to challenge LSU a bit at, it has to start with Kylan Hill, the running back who decided to take his name out of the NFL draft, return to Mississippi State in a role that was kind of unidentified at first, because when he first said that he wanted to come back, you think of a running back and the Mike Leach offense, you think of kind of just a utility guy. But what they've been able to construct in the offense for him, at least what it seems from what we hear at practice, and when we talk to the players and the coaches, is that he's going to be all over the field. He's going to line up sometimes in the slot. He's going to line up at running back. He's going to touch the ball about as much, if not more, than he has in the past, because of the way that they're game planning. And with the LSU defense and how good they were last year and how many names they're working to replace, I think that that's a good place for them to try to exploit, at least early. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be simple. And I guarantee you the defense has been focusing on Hill just as much as Hill has been focusing on them.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Kylan Hill is a name that folks in Baton Rouge know. He was a big talking point last year, just a lot of respect for, the talent and skill set that he brings to the field. And then this year, he was one of the first names referenced by Coach Ogeron on Monday in terms of players that the Tigers defense needs to make sure to keep an eye on, because he can certainly hurt you with everything he brings to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you were mentioning a three-headed attack at running back. What are those names going to be this time around?
Yeah, so obviously Clyde Edwards-Helaire is off to the Chiefs and had that huge debut about a week and a half ago. And so behind him, he leaves Chris Curry, who figures to be the first back or the guy that has maybe the earliest opportunity to lead the way, because they will, as much as they talk about rotating touches right now, there is an opportunity there certainly for someone to run away and become the lead back. And Chris Curry, who stepped in when Clyde was injured in that semifinal and had 90 yards on, I believe it was 16 carries in December. He's the third-year sophomore, so a little bit older. He's the I guess the first head of that three-headed rushing attack, and then Ty Davis-Price and John Emery, a couple of in-state guys that are now true sophomores. Ty played a lot last year and was the second leading rusher for most of the year, but all three guys played behind Clyde in 2019, and John is, maybe as big of a threat as any of the three of them, although he has probably played the least of the three of them, or played the least in some big moments or a little bit less in some big moments than Ty and Chris, but all three will be folks that will likely garner some carries on Saturday as well as throughout the season.
Yeah, for sure. I remember Emery's recruitment. I wasn't covering Mississippi State at the time, but I know for a long time they thought that they had him in the bag. They thought it was done. And then I think he was committed to Georgia at one point, and then some things happened and he ended up going to LSU, and that was, just another big in-state win for them. That's what they seem to do in the state of Louisiana. But Emery, like you said, he's got a chance to kind of live up to that hype. And I think that's, something that anybody could be motivated for. I don't really think that, with everybody waiting so long for the season to get here and for all of the questions and the doubts and the COVID testing and everything, I don't think that this is going to be a game that either team's going to have to kind of get motivated for. You know what I mean? Like, I think that they're both so ready and eager to kind of prove themselves. Like we were talking about earlier, Leach's offense with talent. Washington State had talent, but Leach's offense with SEC talent going up against what was last year arguably the best team in the nation. I mean, they won the national championship. So regardless of who's on the roster this year, they still have those rings from last year, and they're still, they still got the experience, and the players still, have talent. Derek Stingley, you've got players all over the field defensively who are going to be able to make plays.
Yeah, and this has been a fun matchup in recent years too. I know it's one that has been notable for each program through the years, and certainly since Dak and company got the best of LSU for the first time in quite a while, it's been a little bit more interesting the past 5+ years, with Mississippi State also handing LSU one of its worst losses in quite a while a couple of years ago, and those guys having to kind of regroup and get back on the right track as a program after that rough one in Starkville just a few years back. So it'll be one that because of the nature of these two teams and the rivalry to an extent over the past few years, and then also everything you mentioned in terms of everyone's just happy to play some football and have been waiting for so long, and now recent weeks they're starting to watch football being played elsewhere around the country in some of these other conferences and have been waiting their turn. And although it's an afternoon matchup, not the prime time 7 p.m. or 7:30 p.m. kickoff and whatnot, it's one that certainly a lot of excitement will go into from the players and a lot of attention from the fan bases.
Yeah, for sure. I think LSU is used to playing at 3:30 on CBS. Mississippi State might not exactly be used to that kind of spotlight yet at least. This season with the different TV windows, the different games, games being canceled and postponed at the last minute. I'm not sure if you noticed last week, but there was games that were scheduled for Saturday that were pushed back on Friday. And just hearing that and, talking to coaches around the country, throughout this whole pandemic, you've got test results coming in at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, determining whether or not a kid can play in 3 hours for a noon kickoff. And that's just crazy because, with all of this, they don't have time to game plan for anything like that. They've got 3 hours. And for some, they could be losing 10 to 15 guys. And some schools opt to play and continue. At least in the ACC, they don't have like a specific minimums. So with that, schools can keep playing without them. But you saw today on Tuesday that Notre Dame opted to cancel their game with Wake Forest because they're canceling football practice for indefinitely. And just imagining how that could work in the SEC when like we both said, there's so much hype and almost anxiety. Like players are anxious, ready to get after it, ready to hit somebody not wearing maroon or purple. That if that were to happen, it's just going to be crazy to see kind of how everything works out.
Yeah, I definitely, as excited as we are to get started with some SEC football, I'm interested to see how things play out over the long haul of a theoretically 10-game, 11-week SEC season, because we have seen a lot of cancellations and postponements in other conferences leading up to now, and with some of the uncertainty of who may be available in a couple of days, or as you mentioned, a couple hours, it makes things that much more challenging for the coaches and players to prepare for. But also, I think for the guys that are able to get out there on Saturdays, makes them appreciate that opportunity that much more. And you realize you can't take any of that for granted, because you saw how close it was to being taken away a month or two ago. And you see it being taken away at least on a day-by-day basis in some other areas, or for guys that have to sit out of practice for a week or two because of quarantine. So it's going to be a bizarre fall, as you'd expect when we're starting on September 26th with all conference games.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's going to be a tougher slate than usual. I think for all SEC teams, somebody who with a normal schedule may have went 8-4, 7-5, you may see them go 3-7 or 4-6, and just seeing the reaction from the fans on that, potentially the administrators and with the schools that are struggling, just seeing how everybody is kind of understanding and really how the coaching carousel ends up. I know. Last year LSU ended up, losing their offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, to the NFL. He was one of the most wanted people in, I feel like, all of college football because the offense he ran. And, to see how that turned out, it's just imagining how something like that could play out with the way that the schedule's gone. Like you said, I think the early signing period is the week before the SEC championship game. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Because then the SEC championship, and then the day after, isn't that the playoff committee's decision?
Yeah, I don't know the exact the postseason schedule with the playoff committee and stuff.
I mean, everything's scheduled is subject to change, as we've seen with with baseball and even with college football already. Now, kind of getting back to the game for a second. We've been talking all about the offense versus the defense. What about LSU's offense versus Mississippi State's defense? What do you think is going to kind of be the X factor in the game?
I think we're very interested to see what the Miles Brennan era looks like. Obviously, anyone being realistic doesn't expect LSU's offense to look like it did last year in terms of setting one record after another with everything that was lost there. But there is a lot of optimism that it can still be a very potent offense. I mean, it's an offense that Miles Brennan knows, and even with Joe Brady gone, I don't think they expect to see a ton of changes. I mean, there will be some adjustments with Scott Linehan coming in and just some personnel differences, particularly at quarterback. But they want to do a lot of the same things. They want to spread things out and throw the ball around and get the ball into the hands of their playmakers in some good space and in some good matchups. And with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Thaddeus Moss and Clyde Edwards-Helaire all gone, certainly a lot of big shoes to fill in terms of those playmakers as well. But Terrace Marshall Jr. is a guy that comes back, a guy that you would also be familiar with from the recruiting trail. Eric Gilbert, the tight end, is
absolutely
somebody that they're talking about as having the potential to be the greatest tight end in the history of college football. So I think that's another area that folks are interested to see that hype around a freshman tight end play out for the first time in an actual game situation on Saturday, and kind of how much to buy into that hype and exactly how good he can be for this offense and helping out a first-year starter at quarterback.
Yeah, that's I think that's going to definitely be an X factor and play a big role, because Mississippi State's secondary, I mean, they've got safeties, but the corners, you've got a true sophomore who's going to be their number one corner. I mean, similar to LSU, but this isn't a former 5-star kid. This is a former 3-star kid they signed out of the state of Florida back when he was in high school, and Martin Emerson Jr. And then you've got on the other side, they're starting Isaiah Spurge, and behind him is a true freshman in Emmanuel Forbes. So kind of seeing how that plays out and really what role that plays in the determining the result of a game. Because, I mean, Emerson's got experience, but the rest of them don't. And then, I mean, the safeties, you've got Fred Peters, who is talked about as one of the leaders of the defense, you know, both on the field and off. And just seeing how he's able to kind of command the secondary, a unit that's so inexperienced and kind of searching for a leader. You know, they lost Jerian Jones to a transfer to Florida State in the off season. And then they lost Cam Dantzler to the Minnesota Vikings in the NFL. And there's such a need there for a leader and somebody to kind of step up. And while it sounds like Emerson has stepped up and been, you know, vocal about things, it seems, well, I guess we'll kind of see. We'll definitely have to wait and see how it plays out. But Emerson's experience doesn't equal, you know, added talent. You know what I mean?
I'm ready to see what my guy Sean Preston Jr. can do out there. One of the Louisiana guys. You mentioned Cam Dantzler's obviously on to the NFL. Some Louisiana guys out on that roster though, and I know there's a lot of folks down in Southeast Louisiana that want to see if Sean Jr. can make an impact in that secondary now and take on a little bit bigger of a role.
Yeah, there's going to be he'll have potential to do so. I know he's at least listed behind Marcus Murphy on the depth chart, but you know, we've talked about the importance of a depth chart. I think that, you know, as the game goes on and he'll get his time and he'll be in situations where he'll have a chance to make plays. And I think that's the kind of census around this defense is that the number one goal is to just put players in position to make the right plays. And whether or not they're able to actually make the plays when they're in position, or if they get, you know, ran by or ran over, as we've seen in the past with LSU, still to be determined.
We'll see how it all shakes out on Saturday. I think we're all just looking forward to watching some SEC ball.
Absolutely.
Russell, appreciate you, man, taking some time and chatting about it, and hopefully do it again here at some point. Again, Russell Johnson from BulldogBlitz, and I'm Jerit Rosa for TigerDetails.com. Make sure you check out both sites on the Rivals Network as we gear up for this season opener for the Bulldogs and Tigers, and then cover that game on Saturday. Thanks again, man.
Thank you.